So before I begin, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, Shama Mataji and the devotees, for participating in this class. And I'm not qualified to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, but thanks for giving me the opportunity. I take it as an opportunity to purify myself. So before we begin, as usual, we will start with singing the Jai Radha Madhava prayers. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Giridhari Radhe Jaya Radha Giridhari Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladev Jaya Subhadra Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladev Jaya Subhadra Jaya Bal Gopal Jaya Bal Gopal Jaya Bal Gopal Jaya Bal Gopal Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev जय श्री राधा गिरिधारी भगवान की जय जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा मैया की जय गौरनिताय की जय प्रभुपाद की जय गुरुदेव की जय So before we start with Prabhupada Lilamrita, continuing from where we were. So we were October 10. It was early. Swamiji had not yet come down for class and the sun had not yet risen. Satsvarupa and Kirtanananda sat on the floor of the storefront reading a clipping from the Morning Times. Satsvarupa: has the Swami seen it? Kirtanananda: yes, just a few minutes ago. He said it's very important. It's historic. He especially liked that it was the New York Times. Satsvarupa reading aloud: Swami's flock chants in park to find ecstasy. 50 followers clap and sway to hypnotic music at East Side ceremony. Sitting under a tree in a Lower East Side park and occasionally dancing, 50 followers of a Hindu Swami repeated a 16-word chant for 2 hours yesterday. It was more than 2 hours. For 2 hours yesterday afternoon, to the accompaniment of cymbals, tambourines, sticks, drums, bells, and a small reed organ. Repetition of the chant, Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta says, is the best way to achieve self-realization in this age of destruction. While children played on Howings Hill, a pile of dirt in the middle of Tompkins Square Park. Howings Hill? Kirtanananda says, I think it's a joke named after the park's commissioner, said Swarupa. Oh, Howings Hill, a pile of dirt in the middle of Tompkins Square Park, or bicycled along the sunny walks, many in the crowd of about 100 persons standing around the chanters found themselves swaying to or clapping hands in time to the hypnotic rhythmic music. It brings a state of ecstasy, said Allen Ginsberg, the poet, who was one of the celebrants. For one thing, Allen Ginsberg said, the syllables force yoga breath control. That's one physiological explanation. Said Swarupa and Kirtanananda, laughing. That's nonsense. The ecstasy of the chant of or mantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kirtanananda, the Swami said that's the best part because they have printed the mantra, it is all perfect. Whoever reads this can be purified, just the same as if they had chanted. Satsvarupa, continuing, has replaced LSD and other drugs for many of the Swami's followers. Mr. Ginsberg said, he explained that Hare Krishna, pronounced Hare, is the name for Vishnu, a Hindu god, as a bringer of light. Rama, pronounced Rama, is the incarnation of Vishnu as a prince of responsibility. What? Where did he get that? It sounds like something out of an encyclopedia. The chant therefore names different aspects of God, Mr. Ginsberg said. Why so much from Mr. Ginsberg? Why not Swamiji? Another celebrant, 26-year-old Howard M. Wheeler, who described himself as a former English instructor at Ohio State University, now devoting his full time to the Swami, said, I myself took 50 doses of LSD and a dozen of peyote in 2 years, and now nothing. Laughter. The Swami orders his followers to give up all intoxicants, including coffee, tea, and cigarettes. He said in an interview after the ceremony, in this sense, we are helping your government. He added, however, he indicated the government apparently has not appreciated this help sufficiently, for the Department of Immigration recently told Swami Bhaktivedanta that his 1-year visitor's visa had expired and that he must leave. He said, the case is being appealed. Can I stop here, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji, thank you.
Thank you. Let's continue on. Before we start today's class, we'll do the Mangalacharam, our invocation prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vishrama Madhava Swamin Iti Namine Gurum Gauram Giri Shreshtham Yo Vishram Bhena Sevate Madhavam Tulasi Ramakrishna Kirti Karam Sure Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Gurum Dinataranam Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike. I'd like to thank Srila Prabhupada for his books, for his greatest contributions, his various books which we refer to every day, without which I couldn't understand any of these topics or speak about it. So Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and several others. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Let's continue today's verse. Today we are speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 28, verse number 1. The title of the chapter is Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Narada Uvacha Sainika Bhaya Namno Ye Badheshmandiஷ்ඨकारिणः Prajvarakala-kanyabhyam Vicherur Avanimimam. Narada Uvacha Sainika Bhaya Namno Ye Badheshmandiஷ்ඨकारिणः Prajvarakala-kanyabhyam Vicherur Avanimimam. Narada Uvacha Sainika Bhaya Namno Ye Badheshmandiஷ்ඨकारिणः Prajvarakala-kanyabhyam Vicherur Avanimimam. There any volunteers to chant the verse today?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
Naraduvacha Sainika Bhayanamno Ye Parishmandishtakarino Rajvaro Kalakanyapyam Vichirur Abhinam Imam Avanim Imam. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. I am also trying.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Narada Uvacha Sainika Bhayanamno Ye Barhishandishtakarina Prajyaro Kalo Kanyabhyam Vicheruro Avanimimam. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Narada Uvacha Shoinika Bhayanamno Ye Borhishmandishtakarinaha Prajvara Kalakonyabhyam Vicheruravani. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, may I try
Hare
please?
Krishna, Mataji. Yes,
Dandavat
Mataji.
Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Mataji.
Naradvacha Sainika Bhayanamano Ye Bahisman Dishtakarina Prajwar Kal Kanyabhyam Vicherure Avanim Imam. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, can I try?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mataji.
Narada Uvacha Sainikabhyanamno Ye Barhishman Dushtakarina Parajvara Kala Kanyabhyam Vechurur Avanim Imam. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Should we continue with the synonyms? Would anyone like to read the synonyms, please?
Hare Krishna Mataji, I am reading it there.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Narada Uvacha, the great sage Narada continued to speak. Shainika, the soldiers, Bhaya Namno, of Bhaya fear, yea, all of them who, Barhishman, O King Prachin Barishat, Dishtakarinaha, the order of carriers of death, Prajvavara, the Prajavara, Kalakanyabhyam, and with Kalakanya, Vicheruro traveled, Avonim on the earth, Imam, this. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone volunteer to read the translation, please?
May I, Mataji, please?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The great sage Narad Muni continued, My dear King Parachina Bharisit, afterward the king of the Yavanas, whose name is fear itself, as well as Prajvar, Kalakanya, and his soldiers began to travel all over the world. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Anyone for the purport?
Hare Krishna Mataji. Purport by
Thank you,
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The period of life just prior to death is certainly very dangerous because usually at this time people are attacked by the weakness of old age as well as many kinds of disease. The disease that attack the body are compared here to soldiers. These soldiers are not ordinary soldiers, for they are guided by the king of the Yavanas, who acts their commander-in-chief. The word Dishtakarino indicates that he is their commander. When a man is young, he does not care for the old age, but enjoys sex to the best of his satisfaction, not knowing that at the end of life, his sexual indulgence will bring on various diseases, which so much disturb the body that one will pray for immediate death. The more one enjoys sex during the youth, the more he suffers in the old age. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So here we are seeing a very, very frightening or fear-inducing situation being described in this verse, where Srimad Bhagavatam seems to be inducing fear. So the whole of Srimad Bhagavatam, the narrative entirely, there's so much of death and dying, the process of dying. It is almost from the beginning to the end. You see, that is almost like in every chapter, every canto, there's so much of emphasis on death and on the process of dying. And we know there are so many examples, right from Canto 1, we have so many people leaving their bodies. We have Dhritarashtra leaving his body. Then we have Bhishma Dev, and then the Pandavas. Then we come to Dhruva Maharaj, King Anga, then Prithu Maharaj and his exalted wife, Queen Archi. We've seen the examples of them leaving their body. And going forward also, we will see many others leaving their bodies and the description of how they left their bodies. So we have the Prachetas, then the Lord Rishabhdev himself, Supreme Lord. Then we have King Bharata and Ajamila and so many more. So many examples telling us how we must leave this body and how we must not leave this body. So teaching us what the art is of dying. So here also we are talking about death in this verse also. So how have we come to this where we are in this Srimad Bhagavatam at present, is we've been talking about the lineage of King Uttanapad. And there we've seen great kings, King Dhruva, Maharaj Dhruva, then we come down to Anga, and then we come down further Prithu Maharaj. And then after that, 3 generations after that, we come now to King Prachina Barhishat. So it's a very exalted lineage with great kings who have achieved great, some of them the highest goal of life. And here we come to King Prachina Barhishat, who, although he's a very noble king, he's very pious, but he is still highly materialist and a bit different from some of the high exalted kings of his lineage. And so we have come to this part where Narada Muni, he sees King Prachina Barhishat, who is so engaged in material activities in a dharmic way, but he is still very much inclined towards fulfilling his material desires by performing so many yajnas in which there's killing of so many animals for sacrifice. And the great sage Narada Muni, he sees that here is a candidate, he's got so much potential coming from such a great lineage, and he is kind of going to not achieve his full potential. So he is trying to tell him in a way that is suitable for his hearing. So we've seen how Narada Muni is a great teacher. The previous classes, we've explored all these concepts of how Narada Muni knows how to teach. And so in this case, in Prachina Barhishat, he knows he might be a bit defensive if he straight away tells him, what you're doing is wrong, do something else. So he is telling him in the form of an allegory, the allegory of King Puranjana. And even the story of King Puranjana, we see King Puranjana is no one but ourselves. Narada is telling Prachina Barhishat that this is no other than you. And for us, we take it as no other than us. We are also living entities. We are also full of desires. and we're also living a material life. So we are seeing how King Puranjana's life is going. It's finally, he's coming to the end of his life. The end of his life is drawing near. And we see the threesome in this verse. The Bhaya, who is the king of the Yavanas, he's fear personified. Then high temperatures, Prajvara, fever, and Jara, that is old age. This threesome are attacking the city of Puranjana. And this is where we are in the story. Now it's very interesting if we look at Bhaya, the king of the Yavanas, who is their Dishtakarina, who is their commander-in-chief. He's fear. And let's understand this role of fear in our lives. So in one sense, we can understand that fear is very, very necessary for our survival. Because if we were not afraid of some things, for example, if a child is not afraid of fire, it might burn itself. If you're not afraid of the traffic, we might not walk on the footpath, we might go on the road and we might kill ourselves. So fear, in a sense, is very much needed for survival. But at the same time, the same fear, it can stop us from achieving our full potential. So many times, like, we are afraid of doing some things, so we will not take the risk. We will not take some action because we are afraid. We are fearful. What will people think? Or how will I fail? And that stops us from achieving our full potential. In fact, even in relationships, sometimes fear can drive us to behave insecurely or behave enviously, or not behave in the best way. So fear, it also stops us from achieving our full potential. So it is not really healthy in that sense. The other aspect of fear is that when we are fearful, it makes dangerous situations worse than they already are. So already we may be, already the situation is dangerous. For example, I remember when I was a child, I used to be very frightened of bugs. And come the monsoon season in Mumbai, in the evenings, the house will be infiltrated by all these huge buzzing bugs. They will just come in to escape the rain. And I used to be running around very, very fearful, screaming, crying, making myself sick just out of fear of these bugs. And my father would explain to me that, they're so little, why are you so scared of them? And I understand now that if I had not been so scared, the situation would not have been so bad. The bugs would have come and they would have gone. They're little things. But I was just making it more worse than actually it needs to be. So from that point of view, also fear is something not very good. We can actually do much better if we are not fearful. And finally, one other aspect of fear is that if you look at this threesome, fear, fever, and old age, we can do nothing about old age. It's going to come. And along with old age will come all the associating things. Our senses will become weak. Our joints will ache. Our hair will gray and fall off. Our eyesight will become weak. All these physical, activities, all these physical developments, we cannot stop. They will come. They're inevitable. Similarly, at the time of death, Prajvara, the high fever that this verse is talking about, that also is inevitable. That high fever will come upon us, and we will have to pass through it. So these two are not something that we have any control over. But the third one, bhaya or fear, that is something that we have some agency over. We have some we can do something about it. It is something that we can practice and try to overcome. So today, in today's class, I'm going to try and focus more on this aspect of fear and also 1 or 2 points from the purport. So we understand that there are different levels of religion. And this is described in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's book, Chaitanya Shikshashtakam. So he talks about there are 4 levels of religion. The first one is a religion based on fear. So there are some religions, and I think we briefly touched upon it a few days back in His Grace Sambhava Bhava Prabhu's class, how there are some religions that are just based on fear. So if you don't worship God, the God as I describe him, then you will perpetually suffer in hell and you cannot, get out of it. That's one kind of fear. Now, any relationship, like fear is not the basis for any good relationship. So even parents know that. They sometimes parents, to induce a child to behave in a certain way, they might try to make him a bit afraid. Be afraid of your father. He might scold you. But then, no parent wants a relationship based on fear. They don't want the child to be perpetually afraid of them. The next level of religion is that based on desire. So this we have seen how Dhruva Maharaj also, the example of Dhruva Maharaj, where he had the desire to have a kingdom bigger than his great-grandfather Brahma. And he worshipped the Supreme Lord for fulfilling that desire. This is also not very desirable, like even if from the parent, if you look at a parent-child relationship also, no parent wants a child to only have a relationship where the child is forever seeking something from them. The third level of religion, higher than the other two, is that of duty or kartavya. The Lord has provided us with everything: the air, the water, the sun, the moon, the fruits, the vegetables, our whole life. Everything is provided by the Lord to us. So we owe something back to him. So this kind of religion says, yes, we have to be dutiful towards God. We have to worship him because he's the provider of everything. He has maintained us. So we owe him something. And this is higher than the other two. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that this is better in the sense that the other two, once your needs are fulfilled, you might give it up. But here, the sense of duty might make us more firm in our sadhana. And we might, move on to higher level, which is the highest level, which is the level of prema or raga or attraction, spontaneous attraction for the Lord. So this is the highest, as we understand. So sometimes when we read this part of the Bhagavatam especially, there's so much of, description of death and dying and the soldiers and Yavanaraj and Kala and old age and all this. It seems like this part of Bhagavatam is actually inducing fear, inducing King Prachina Barhisha to worship out of fear. But as we understand it, it is not the same, because in this case, the fear is being described, but it is as an impetus to provoke or to promote this person to a higher level of religion, which is devotion or bhakti or prem. And here, Narad Muni also, we have to see that he's seeing the potential. So he's seeing that this king has the potential to rise to the highest level. He's from this great lineage. He's got the software already. He's got the hardware already. He's hardwired already to reach the highest potential. So he is seeing that potential, and therefore he is taking a step back in order to kind of help him go much forward and much ahead in his journey. Similarly, Narad Muni, we should also understand, is not only preaching to King Prachina Barhishat, he's also preaching to us. When we have this book in our hand and we are reading these verses, we should understand that the Acharyas and the Lord is seeing this potential in us for us to also reach the highest level, the highest goal of prema. And that's why we are reading these verses and trying to understand these. So even though fear is described, it's as a potential to reach the highest level of prema. We come to this story. I heard the story of King Bhartrahari in one of the classes that of His Holiness Swayam Bhagavan Yesho Maharaj. He gave a class on the same section of the Bhagavatam. It's called the nine types of fear. So in that, he describes the story of King Bhartrahari. So this is a real story where several thousand years ago, there was this great king named Bhartrahari in Ujjain. And as we understand, he was the older brother of King Vikramaditya, who also became later a very famous king. So this King Bhartrahari's story is very interesting. In his life, he was also a writer. So he wrote three poems, each of 100 verses each. And they're called Shatakams. So the first one is called Niti Shatakam. And the Niti Shatakam is all about about leadership, about administration, about how to rule, the Niti, how an administrator should rule his kingdom. That is the Niti Shatakam. After that, he wrote another big 100-verse poem called the Shringara Satakam. The Shringara Satakam is all about the glories of the opposite gender, the beauty of the opposite gender, describing Shringar. Finally, after that, he wrote what's called the Vairagya Shatakam. Vairagya Shatakam is all about Vairagya. Now, there's a story what impelled him to write this Vairagya Shatakam, and it's very interesting. So this king, being a very noble king, he used to have great sages and saints visiting his kingdom. One day, such a great saint came, visited his kingdom, and the king received him and welcomed him and treated him very hospitably. The sage was very pleased with the king's behavior and presented him with a fruit. The sage said, if you have this is the fruit of immortality. If you have this fruit, then you will be immortal. So, blessing him with this fruit of immortality, the sage left. And King Bhartrihari, he was happy to receive this fruit, but he had a very great attachment in his life, and that attachment was for his wife, who was named Pingala, his queen. And he was so very attached and in love with this queen, Pingala, that he didn't want even a moment's separation from her. So he was thinking, what is the use? I will have I'll live forever, but what is the use of living if my Pingala is no more? So more than me, it is more important that Pingala should live forever. So he goes and hands the fruit over to his queen, Pingala. This queen, Pingala, unknown to the king, every day she would be going out on a chariot ride, and there was a charioteer who used to take her out every day. And unknown to the king, Queen Pingala was in love with this charioteer. And when she receives this fruit, she thinks, what is the use if I live forever, if I have to live without my lover, the charioteer? So she decides to give him the fruit. So that day she, when after the chariot ride, she gives him this fruit and says, this will make you immortal. Please have it. The charioteer, he takes the fruit, but unknown to the queen, he has his own secret lover who is a prostitute. And so he again thinks similar to the queen and the king. He says, what is the use of me living forever? My beloved must live forever. So he meets his prostitute and he hands the fruit over to her. Now this prostitute, all her life, she has been in awe of the king. And she always wanted an audience with the king. She wanted to meet him. But because she's of a low social stature and the king is so exalted, she never could get an audience with the king. So now she says, oh, I've got this fruit now, this fruit of immortality. So if I can now, using this, I can go and meet the king. So she goes to the king's palace and she says, I have to meet the king. I have something very important to give him. And then she gains an audience with the king. And when the king sees the fruit, he begins to understand what might have happened. And that basically provokes him to become, he becomes disappointed with this material world. He says, what is this? You invest your life and your love in something material, and there is nothing, it doesn't get reciprocated. So he, gives him the impetus to compose this Vairagya Shatakam. So this Vairagya Shatakam has got some very beautiful verses. Some of them are very relevant to our class today, which is why we're referring to it. So let's just look at a few verses. One of them is verse number 7. I'll just read it. Bhoga na bhukta vayameva bhukta, tapo na taptam vayameva taptaha, kalo na yato vayameva yata, trishna na jirna vayameva jirnaha. It means worldly pleasures have not been enjoyed by us, but we ourselves have been devoured by them. No religious austerities have been performed, but we ourselves have become scorched by the austerities. Time is not gone, it is ever present, it is infinite, but we ourselves are gone because of approaching death. And desire is not reducing in force, although we ourselves are reduced to old age and senility. So it's basically saying how, like in this verse, in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining that when we are overindulging in sense gratification, then it leads to so many diseases. It brings on so much of suffering. So similarly, when we are, this verse is saying similar. It's saying that when you are enjoying sense pleasures, you are thinking you're enjoying it, but actually you are being enjoyed. You're being devoured by these sense pleasures of this world. There's a proverb, a famous proverb by a Japanese proverb, which says, first man takes a drink, then a drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man. So the first time somebody is indulging in sense gratification, he thinks he's enjoying it. But then that impels him to more and more sense gratification, more and more. And then finally, the sense gratification has overtaken him and taken control of his life. So this is, there is a misconception that sense gratification is happiness. But actually, it is not the case. It is a misconception. So the next, another verse in this Vairagya Shatakam is describing the 9 types of fear. So I'll just read this again. Bhoge roga bhayam kule chuti bhayam vitte nripalad bhayam mane dainya bhayam bale ripu bhayam rupe jaraya bhayam shastre vadi bhayam gune khala bhayam kaye kritantad bhayam sarvam vastu bhayan vitam bhuvi nram vairagyam eva abhayam. In enjoyment, there is a fear of disease. In social position, the fear of falling off. In wealth, the fear of it being lost. In honor, the fear of humiliation. In power, the fear of enemies. In beauty, the fear of old age. In scholarship, the fear of opposing theories. In virtue, in body, the fear of death. So everyone fears death. So all the things in this world pertaining to man are attended with fear. The only thing that is bring up fearlessness is renunciation or vairagya. So basically, it's self-explanatory how every aspect of life, of material life, induces fear. We will see later how to overcome these fears, but for now, stay with this thought. Another very nice verse, which again I thought was very relevant, pertinent for us today, is verse number 75. I will just read the translation. It says, as long as his body is free from disease and decrepitude, as long as old age is far off, as long as the powers of the senses are unaffected and life is not decaying, so long wise persons should try their best for the sake of their supreme good. For, and this is important, it says, when the house is on fire, what is the use of setting about digging a well? So when old age is already upon us, at that time, if you start, okay, let me now start the process of devotional service. Let me now try to, get detached. Let me now try to focus on higher things. It might be a bit too late. I'm not saying it will be too late, but it might be a bit too late because the house is already on fire. What is the use of digging a well for water at that stage? Now we've looked at fear, we've looked at detachment. Now let's look at some ways of overcoming this fear. So carrying on from the Vairagya Shatakam's 9 types of fear, there are different approaches to how to overcome fear. So we've got the materialist, which is the traditional or the common worldly approach to fear, overcoming fear. And we've got the spiritualist approach, which is what we are trying to develop. For example, one of the fears it says is sense gratification fears disease. Because if you're diseased, you cannot enjoy your senses to the maximum. So the materialist, he says, okay, if I'm fearing disease, let me get vaccines. Let me go to doctors. Let me have good health insurance. Let me have good health care. Let me focus on my nutrition and my diet. That's the materialistic approach. The spiritualist says, if you want to get over this fear, then you lessen your sense gratification. So lessen your hopes of happiness on sense gratification. Then greed fears loss of wealth. So when we fear loss of wealth, the materialist will say, let me invest wisely. Let me find good investment schemes. Let me have good Swiss bank accounts. Let me have insurance. Let me protect my house with dogs. Let me put on house alarms. That's a materialistic approach to protecting to get over his fear. The spiritualist knows that this is not very, it's not, it might be a temporary solution, but the better way to overcome this fear is to give up the greed, to give up the tendency to attach your or invest your hopes on your wealth. Similarly, if you're attached to your near and dear ones, then attachment fears loss of relationships or loss of family. The materialist approach is to be protective, be defensive, be very, be very protective of your near and dear ones. But how long are you going to be there? So the spiritualist understands that this is probably futile. So the higher principle he takes up is give up the attachment. Then beauty fears old age. We know this. There's so many skincare, the skincare industry, the hair care industry, all of them, they're thriving because beauty fears old age. So materialist approaches to do something artificial to make sure that your beauty remains. The spiritualist knows that that is not a long-term approach. The better thing to do would be to give up your identification with your bodily beauty, to find a superior identification. So that's the spiritualist approach that we are all trying to cultivate. Then some other points we can look at for overcoming fear. This is something I read, and this is something we also know. So, there's a book called Road Less Traveled by an author called M. Scott Peck. So he says, one of his statements there is that if you are living a life based on truthfulness, then if you're sticking to the truth, then you will be fearless. And that's true. We see also in our lives. So, when we are coming back from India, many of us we'll bring foodstuffs. So if you have foodstuffs in our baggage, but we do not go through the red channel and we come through the green channel in immigration, then we are very fearful, that we might get caught. If we have declared it beforehand, then we won't be scared. We won't have any fear. So we have to live an honest life. What does it mean for us in terms of devotees? Honest living means that we live, we live in accordance with what we are meant to do. So in the sense, we have taken the time to understand what is the goal of this life. So now we've been told, acharyas have told us, they made us realize that this is the goal of our life. So now with the goal of our life clear, then the acharyas have told us, given us instructions on how to lead this life. What should we do? What should our daily practices be? How should we live? What should we invest our time and efforts in? So we have all this information. So if we are living according to this, if you're living according to the scriptures and to the instructions we've received, then that is honest living. Then we can be fearless because we have done all we can do. And so we are fully prepared, well prepared at the time of death. Another way to overcome fear is to be surrendered. So we know this verse from Bhagavad Gita 18.66. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. So the more surrendered we are, the more we are going to be fearless. Of course, Vairagya, we've talked about it today, Vairagya Shatakam. But Vairagya, in that verse, he's saying Vairagya is the only way to be fearless. So we understand that for us, Vairagya does not mean just detachment. It means Vishesh Rag. Vishesh Rag means special kind of attachment. So detachment from matter means a special kind of attachment to something spiritual. And how do we develop this Vishesh Rag? We know the normal formulas, the usual formulas. We've gone through it so many times. Every day we are listening to this, that we must develop Namaruchi. We must engage in Vaishnava Seva. So Namaruchi, once Srila Prabhupada, he was asked, what do you feel, Prabhupada, when you chant Hare Krishna? So Prabhupada could have said so many things. He could have said, love of God and all those high things. But what he said that when I chant Hare Krishna, I feel no fear. So when we take shelter of the holy name, when we develop a taste for the holy name, then automatically we are overcoming fear. And of course, Vaishnava Seva serving the book and person Bhagavat. So when we serve the Vaishnavas, then we are also, it's like a analogy. When we have like very strong, when we have a wound and we put a plaster on it, a medical plaster, then if you have to remove the plaster off when it's new, then it is very difficult. It's very painful also to remove the plaster. But over time, when it gets repeated wash and repeated water on it, then it becomes loose and then we can easily remove it. It just falls off easily. Similarly, for us, our false ego is very strong. And we, at the end of our life, if we have to give up this false ego, which is the only way for us to go back to Godhead, then that false ego will not fall off easily. But when we engage in Vaishnava Seva, when we are serving the book and person Bhagavat, when we engage in service, then this false ego, the glue of false ego will become weaker and weaker. And finally, we can achieve our goal and we can be fearless. Finally, Jivira Daya, showing mercy, compassion to other living entities, it softens our heart, makes us more vulnerable, more willing, more ready to accept, more ready to develop a taste for the holy name, more willing to engage in Vaishnava Seva. So it's very necessary. And also we understand from, in normal living, we see many times we are very fearful for doing things for ourselves. But when we have to serve, when we have to do for somebody else, suddenly from somewhere we get, supernatural or supernormal courage. So Jivir Daya will help us also to overcome fear. And finally, I want to give the example of His Grace Prana Prabhu, our dear Prana Prabhu, who left us recently. So I was listening to his, he was interviewed before he left from Melbourne, from Australia, to go back to India for his final journey. Before that, he was interviewed, and I was listening to that interview. And towards the end of the interview, the interviewer asked him pointedly, Prabhu, how are you preparing for your final journey? How are you preparing? Can you share with us? And Prana Prabhu said that it's not that I'm preparing now. It's a lifetime of preparation. And so too it is with us. Throughout our lives, we are preparing. We are tested so many times through so many things. And each test, so many small and big tests we face throughout life. And each is a test, for us to develop this fearlessness and to be prepared for death and dying. So even, and Pranab Prabhu said something very interesting. He said, even if you're failing in the small tests of life, even if you think you have failed, it does not matter so long as you've learned the lesson. And so long as we've learned the lesson, it will be with us, it will stay with us, and will help us to be fearless at the time of death. And we also had a chance, we're very, very fortunate to have a chance to meet him just a few days before he passed away in Vrindavan. And Prabhu was so cheerful, it was amazing. I've never seen, he looked unchanged. He still had a smiling face, he was still welcoming, and he still had a time for us. And he spoke to us. And we could, it was amazing. I can't believe that it is a person so close to death, the way he was. And I'll always carry that with me. And so it's basically, basically as Krishna says, if you are conscious of me, you will pass through all hurdles by my grace. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 58. So, with that, basically we can be very hopeful that if we are living honestly, if we are taking interest in spiritual matters and we are engaging ourselves properly, then we all can be hopeful that we are going back to Godhead and we can overcome fear. So with that, I'd like to conclude today's class. If anyone has anything to share or any reflections, any comments, any questions, or if you want to correct anything I've said, please feel free. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Very good beginning of this new chapter. Puranjana becomes the woman in the next life. You see, how we are fearful. So it starts with the advice from Narad Muni, how he is trying to tell us what are the 3 points that catches us at the end of our life. That's 3 things: Yavan Raj, Rajvara, and Kalaganya. These three things will always be there as you grow old. But then Narad Muni was telling us how to overcome these, as he given examples of the elder brother of Vikramaditya. It's so beautiful. He was trying in a very example with this fruit. He was delivering the fruit from one, he was giving one to another, but the ultimate goal was there, how to become immortal. But finally it comes to him. But the thing is, nothing is immortal. Everything is perishable. Only one thing that remains with us is our good activities that carries with us. So this is the beginning of our preparing of life, and you have given the 9 types of fear, how it help us to understand what is the best way to give ourselves in the dutiful way towards spiritual connection, and that is what is actually vairagya. When you become renounced of all this fear, all this sense pleasure, we become fearless, and that is what the lesson from this text. And you have very nicely explained in a simple way to understand it. And the example of how Prana Prabhu was passing his days at the end of his life. He was cheerful because he had realized the real goal of life. It is nothing with the body. It is all about the soul. When the soul becomes pleasurable because of its connection with the super soul, it automatically becomes peaceful, fearful, and ultimately waiting for the ultimate goal of life. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Thank
you very much. It was a very, very, very nice class, particularly mentioning the points that a person faces in his old age and how to overcome this. And what is most important of all these things is that unless we surrender to the Lord and understand that He is the controller, but in this material world, unfortunately, most of the people think that He is the maintainer and not the Lord. So the basic problem starts from there. When we think we are the maintainer, we make a plan for that, which in every stage of life, and a devotee who has got the, as Chaitanya Swami is told, Krishna je boje she borochutu. He knows that Krishna is the maintainer. When if we surrender to him, he is the person from whom everything is emanated, and he is in control of everything. So, and he is the best knowledgeable person, he is the most wealthiest person, he is the most knowledgeable person, he has the most fame, and everything is 6 qualities in absolute sense it is with him. So if we remain under his protection, we are protected. But any other plans we do ourselves, considering we are the controller, it is going to be frustrated. And ultimately, for death also, if we depend on the Krishna for what is happening, we are taken care of by the Lord, and never forget our association with the Lord. We can overcome fear, and at every stage of our life, no matter whatever comes in, we consider it. The Lord is taking care of us, and whatever is coming to us is in case of adversities, He has given me the least adversity, and so I have to bear with that. And the Lord is protecting us, so I'll be protected. And from this conception, we can overcome fear. And that is the lesson a devotee does throughout his life, as we have given the example of Maharaj Hermetic. So ultimately, if we are connected to the Lord, we are fearless. And if we are not connected to the Lord, at every stage, we are fearful. And ultimately, the material people surrenders to that, and they cannot overcome the fear from their life because they are not connected to the Lord ultimately. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice. Yes, Hare Krishna. It's a connection to the Lord that makes us fearless, not anything else. Thank you very much. If there are no other comments or questions, maybe we can conclude for today.
Yes, Mother, it appears there is no other question to comment. So you can come.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai.
Hare Krishna Tulsi
Prabhupada
Joy.
ki jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari.
All glory to the Dasam
Dasan
Multiple.
Gaur Devotee, Hare Krishna.